Hello YouTube divers, this is WaterDive122 and I want to welcome you all to the very first video of 2022. Happy New Year to all my fellow YouTube divers out there, all you newcomers out there who are watching my channel, subscribe to my channel, whatever the heck you want to call it. Happy New Year to you guys, and we're going to kick off 2022 with my top 10 favorite albums from the Big Four here on Magic Metal Mondays. So, what this video is that we are going to be going through my 10 favorite albums between Metallica, Slayer, Megadeth, and Anthrax. So basically we'll have a couple albums from each band, if that makes sense. In my end of the year list, I just want to get this out of the way. My end of the year list will be out sometime this weekend. Don't really quote me on that because I'm still trying to figure out which albums I want to have on my 2021 list. I gotta do it fast because there's supposed to be a lot of great albums coming out this year. So with that said, we're just jump right into my top 10 favorite albums of the Big Four, and we'll do the end of the year list. I want to say this weekend. So with that said, here we go. So my number 10 is South of Heaven by Slayer, released in 1988. And, excuse me. This album, in my opinion, is really strong. If you've seen my album review for South of Heaven, then you know. If not, I will tell you. This album has a very unique take on Slayer's signature sound. This is a way different album compared to their three preceding albums, so Show No Mercy, Hell Awaits, and of course the classic Rain and Blood. But here on South of Heaven, they use more slower songs. Those songs aren't as powerful, but at the same time, they're still memorable. And that's the one thing that I love, and that's one of the things I love about South of Heaven, is that a lot of the songs on here are so freaking memorable. Just go listen to the title track, Mandatory Suicide, and Spill the Blood, if you want very memorable songs on here. There's also a lot of other great songs on here, like Silent Scream, Behind the Crooked Cross, and Ghosts of War, I believe. Yeah, Ghosts of War. And of course, the Judas Priest cover of Dissident Aggressor is just amazing. This album is great. It does have its flaws, though. I explained those on the album review, so I won't talk about it here. But yeah, overall, South of Heaven is just a great album, and it has to be here in my top 10 from the Big Four. Now, moving on to number 9, we got Ride the Lightning by Metallica, my third favorite Metallica record. Yes, there are Metallica and Slayer have 3 albums on this list. I'm limiting the album count to no more than 3 per band, but only Metallica and Slayer have 3 albums on this list. Of course, I will give out honorable mentions at the very end. But Metallica, Ride the Lightning is, in my opinion, Ride the Lightning is what put Metallica on the map. They did some great stuff with Kill 'Em All. Of course, many view that as a classic, but I'm personally not a big fan of Kill 'Em All. Specifically James Hetfield's vocals, and a couple of the songs here and there. Like, I've never been a big fan of Motor Breath, and Pulling Teeth, Anastasia Pulling Teeth is just okay in my books. But of course, there's no denying that Kill 'Em All was an important record for the metal world, because it was basically the album that invented thrash metal. So there's that. But here on Ride the Lightning, they do it so much better. The production's more punchy. The sound is more powerful. James Hetfield's vocals are starting to connect with me a little bit on certain tracks, like the title track and For Whom the Bell Tolls, Fade to Black, of course, Creeping Death, and even the song Escape. I really like Escape. A lot of people talk smack about that song, but I think it's fine. Five Fire with Fire is just such a killer opener. It's just a great time, no doubt. And then of course the instrumental Call of Cthulhu is just so freaking amazing. But overall, Ride the Lightning is a very strong album, and it's, in my opinion, a thrash metal classic, and basically the album that put Metallica on the map. Like, I don't think Metallica would have gone the direction that they eventually would go in if it weren't for this album. So yeah, Ride the Lightning here at number 9. Number 8 is Seasons in the Abyss by Slayer, my second favorite Slayer album. But yeah, I love Seasons in the Abyss. It's a classic. I mean, of course, you got War Ensemble and Dead Skin Mask, which is my favorite song on the album, and of course the ever iconic title track, Skeletons of Society. The list just goes on. This album is just so strong, and in my opinion, this is the perfect marriage between the two worlds of Slayer. Like, it's the marriage between the thrashy and more powerful side of Slayer, like we saw on albums like Rain and Blood, for example, and then the slower stuff that we saw on South of Heaven. It's just the perfect blend, the perfect marriage between those two types of Slayer sounds. And you get Seasons in the Abyss, which is just an absolute freaking fracking metal classic. And I know a lot of Slayer fans would have this at the top of their list, but I don't, because I like one other Slayer album a little bit more than this one, but we'll get to that later on in the video. But overall, Seasons in the Abyss, what more do you want me to say? It's just a killer album from start to finish. I love this record. What more can I say? I love this album. Alright, moving on to number 7, we got Among the Living by Anthrax, released in 1987. My second favorite Anthrax album. I have talked about this album on my 1987 video and on my Anthrax album rankings. This is not my favorite Anthrax album, but like with all the albums I've talked about so far, it's a freaking classic. And I know a lot of people would have this at the top of their Anthrax rankings, and I understand why. This album is just a heavy-hitting, powerful, in-your-face riff machine. There's not a single song on this album where a riff happens and you just go, oh yeah, that was such a great riff. I want to play that again. Uh, my issues with this album is that the production is a little bit tainted, in my opinion. It doesn't really sound that great. Like, turning up those guitars a little bit, turn down those drums just a little bit. I don't know. But the title track, Caught in a Mosh, Indians, NFL, Imitation of Life, I Am the Law. What more do you want me to say? This album is just a classic. However, I do prefer another Anthrax album, but we'll get to that later on in the video. So with that said, Among the Living by Anthrax coming in here at number 7. Number 6 is Countdown to Extinction from Megadeth, released in 1992. Like with Among the Living, this album just has a lot of classic songs on here, but it's not a riff machine, but it's not a never-ending riff machine like Among the Living was. Countdown to Extinction is mainly Megadeth's take on the Black Album, if you will, but except Megadeth has a lot more memorable songs, I guess, than on the Black Album. I actually do prefer Countdown to Extinction over the Black Album, even though I listened to both of these albums around the same time. Those were two of my very first metal albums that I listened to. But Countdown to Extinction will always hold a special place in my heart because of my familiarity with it, and of course with the amazing song track on here. Like, probably the most complete album Megadeth ever made, in my opinion, with the exception of one other album. But you got Symphony of Destruction, Foreclosure of a Dream, Sweating Bullets, Skin in My Teeth, the title track, Ashes in My Mouth. The list just goes on. This album is just a commercial masterpiece, and honestly, I think it's one of the best metal albums that an old school metal band released in the 90s. It's just a phenomenal album. What more do you want me to say? Alright, now moving on to number 5, we got And Justice for All by Metallica, released in 1988. This is my second favorite Metallica album. I don't know what the heck I was trying to say. But, yeah, and Justice for All, yeah, the production is a little bit soft, and, you can't hear the freaking bass guitar, which is problematic because I love hearing the bass. Um, but, overall, this album just is just amazing. You got Blackened, you got Harvester of Sorrow, of course, the ever iconic One, which is obviously my favorite song on the album, for sure. The title track's great, Shortest Straw, and Eyes of the Beholder. This album is just amazing. Aside from the production, this album is just freaking amazing. What more do you want me to say? So it ends up here at number 5, just outside of my top 4. Okay, so now these last 4 albums are all in my top 10 overall albums released by anybody. I love all 4 of these records almost equally, but of course, as you already know, I have my reasons why I ordered them the way that I did. But honestly, these 4 albums could be interchangeable any given day. Just, maybe a couple years down the stretch, this list might be completely different. Who knows? So number 4 is Spreading the Disease by Anthrax, released in 1985. This is my favorite Anthrax album, simply because the production is so freaking raw, the songs are just so freaking memorable, and of course Joey Belladonna is in his absolute element here, even though this is his first album with Anthrax, as is their current bass player, Frank Bello. But of course, the guitar duo of Dan Spitz and Scott Ian are just out of this world. I've been listening to a lot of Anthrax recently. Like, Anthrax is probably my go-to band in the Big Four, even though they're like at the very bottom of my Big Four totem pole as of right now. Isn't that weird how music can do that to you? But Anthrax is just such a fun band to listen to, and Spreading the Disease is, in my opinion, a great example of that. They already showed what they can do. They already gave us an idea of where they're going with thrash metal on their debut album, Fistful of Metal, which is not really one of my favorites. And then they take it to a whole nother level here, and they use this sound for pretty much the rest of their 80s and early 90s records. But yeah, but Spreading the Disease, I mean, you got AIR, which is my favorite Anthrax song. You have Madhouse, which is a freaking classic in the genre. Lone Justice, Armed and Dangerous, Medusa. What more do you want me to say? Spreading the Disease, my favorite Anthrax album, and one of my all-time favorites. So with that said, Spreading the Disease coming in here at number 4. Number 3 is Rain and Blood by Slayer, released in 1986. This is easily my favorite Slayer album, and like with South of Heaven, I did a album review for this. I talked a little bit more about why this album works so well for me. But Angel of Death and Raining Blood, yeah, they're a little bit overplayed, but they're classics for a reason. Of course, Postmortem, Necrophobic rather, and Jesus Saves, and Altar of Sacrifice. All the songs I really like on this album. This album is just a freaking a near flawless album. It's a classic for a reason. Rain and Blood, absolutely love it. And now comes the hard part, because both of these albums could be interchangeable any given day. They're like right neck and neck with each other, but there's just one album that has stood the test of time for me. So number 2 is Rust in Peace by Megadeth, released in 1990. This album is freaking amazing. What more do you want me to say? This album just kicks you into gear. It's like with Among the Living, it is a never-ending riff machine. There are just so many great riffs on here that'll just knock you right out, and you just want to go back and listen to it again and again and again. I mean, Holy Wars to Punishment Due is my favorite Megadeth song of all time. Absolutely love that song. I love playing it on the guitar. It's just so great. Follow that up by Hangar 18. If you ask me, that is really a great way to open up an album, with Holy Wars and then Hangar 18 on back-to-back tracks. And then, of course, you get Take No Prisoners and Lucretia, and, of course, the Tornado of Souls. Oh my gosh, man. That guitar solo in Tornado of Souls is just so mind-blowing. And then, of course, the title track, Rust in Peace, Polaris, and Poison Was the Cure. Um, this album just shows Megadeth at their most ferocious, at their most angry, at their most, I don't really know, at their most cohesive, I don't really know. But, this album is just, I can't say it enough. I love this record. First album to feature Marty Friedman and Nick Minza, and of course, with Dave and Dave, with, and of course, combine that with Dave Mustaine and Dave Ellefson, and you got yourselves the best lineup Megadeth ever had. But yeah, Rust in Peace, killer album from start to finish. I love this album. And now we get to number one, which is my second favorite metal album of all time by anybody. And this is another classic. This is Master Puppets by Metallica, released in 1986. And I prefer this over Rust in Peace, mainly because this album is a little bit closer to my heart, because, again, this was another one of those first metal albums I listened to. I mean, like with the title track, and of course, Battery, Damage Incorporated, Orion. What more do you want me to say? This album is just perfect. This is one of the perfect metal albums of all time, along with Rust in Peace, along with Rain and Blood, along with Spreading the Disease. You just get on with that. But yeah, Master Puppets by Metallica. I love this record. It's like with Rust in Peace, it shows Metallica at their most, or like with Rust in Peace did with Megadeth, rather. Master Puppets did the same thing to Metallica. It shows Metallica at their most angry, at their most hungry, at their most ferocious, at their most riff heavy. Like with a lot of the albums I've talked about here, this album is another one of those albums where it is a never-ending riff machine. I mean, just basically, there's like 4 or 5 riffs on the title track alone where I go like, holy jeez, I want to listen to that again. Same thing with Battery, the opener. I mean, like with Rust in Peace, this album just has a perfect opener. Opening up with back-to-back tracks with Battery and the title track. It's just great. And of course, Welcome Home Sanitarium is a beautiful song. Same thing with Orion. This would be the final album to feature Cliff Burton on bass before that bus accident that tragically killed him. But yeah, overall, this album is just a phenomenal album. It's a metal classic for a reason. And then, of course, the 4 honorable mentions I have are the Black Album by Metallica, State of Euphoria by Anthrax, Hell Awaits by Slayer, and Peace Sells But Who's Buying by Megadeth. The only reason, now, honestly, all 4 of these albums, especially Peace Sells and State of Euphoria, could have easily made the list. The only reason why I decided to keep them off is because, I just like the albums that were barely inside my top 10, like South of Heaven, Ride the Lightning, and Seasons in the Abyss, of course, a little bit more. But overall, this list was very tough for me to do because I love all these albums, of course. But overall, that is my top 10 favorite albums from the Big Four. If you want to leave your list down in the comment section below, please feel free to do so. So with that said, that concludes this edition of Magic Metal Mondays. Thank you so much for watching, my fellow YouTube divers. This is WaterDive 122 signing out, ready to dive into more fun on YouTube. Thanks for watching.